conversation about inclusive education. And we've got a great amount of experts who live it each and every day. We've obviously got Dan and Samuel Habib. We've got Alice Fox, co-chair of the Bow Foundation, and her son James. Then we've also got Soraya, and she is a parent engagement specialist with Broxton Public Schools. We've also got Emma, who is an elementary school principal at Boston Public Schools. So I appreciate each of you being here. Dan, I'll turn it to you to walk us through it.
Great. Thanks, Stephen. Hi, everybody, again. If we could go through the PowerPoint slides, I just want to do a little more introduction on each panelist. We have an amazing panel here today. You kind of met me and Samuel yesterday and through the film, so we're not going to do extensive introductions, but you can pass this slide. Dan and Samuel, we're filmmakers and residents of Concord, New Hampshire, and we do a lot of work around inclusive education nationally. So Emma Fialka-Feldman, who I've known for a lot of years, at least 10 years in various capacities. For over a decade, Emma has worked in the Boston Public Schools, teaching in inclusive elementary school settings, mentoring aspiring teachers, and designing curriculum in both literacy and math. Most recently, she's the proud principal of the Roger Clapp Elementary School in Dorchester, Mass., a full inclusion school serving students from age 3 to 11. She's presented nationally about the importance of inclusive education and how to lead this work with compassion and equity. So thank you, Emma, for being with us today. We have James Fox, who also many of you know, but deserves to have his awesome bio read. James just finished 8th grade and is excited to be heading to high school next year. James loves socializing with his friends and family, as well as anything sports related. You and Sam will have a lot in common there. While he loves all sports, football is his number one, and he enjoys cheering on the Denver Broncos. He's hoping for a better season this year, and the University of Virginia. James is also excited to be part of the football team in high school, as he's going to be an assistant play caller. Thanks for joining us, James. Alice Fox, again familiar to many of you, is co-founder and co-chair of the Bow Foundation. In addition to her volunteer work for the Bow Foundation, she runs a music education-based nonprofit in Charlottesville, Virginia, where she lives with her husband, Duke, the foundation's treasurer, her 3 kids, including James, also on the panel, and 2 rescue dogs. Thanks, Alice, for being on the panel. And finally, Soraya. Dr. Soraya was born in Haiti and completed her education there, earning a degree in journalism before going on to Boston University for her master's in social work and 2 doctorates in Christian counseling and educational leadership at Liberty University. She established the nonprofit organization Space in 2014. She's authored multiple books on empowerment, cultural heritage, overcoming fear, and self-esteem. She's currently a family engagement specialist for the Brockton Public Schools. So thank you, Soraya, so much. So the way the structure of today's panel is, we've all had some really great pre-conversations, so we have a lot to talk about, but we also want to create a lot of space for conversation, both for the people here in the room and people joining us virtually on Zoom. So we're going to start with a couple of rounds of questions and discussion, and then we're going to, hopefully for the last 20 to 25 minutes, leave time to just open it up for anything you want to talk about on this huge topic of education and inclusive education. I just want to start by setting the table a little bit for the discussion. I've had the chance to work for the last 20 years doing a lot of films and research and travel all around the country and somewhat internationally around looking at disability rights and inclusive education. And I have found that 2 things can be true at the same time. One is that all the research points to the fact that students with disabilities who are included alongside their non-disabled peers learning the general education curriculum is the best practice. It's the best chance that these kids are going to have to obtain the goals that we all want for them, you know, transitioning to college and employment and full lives in the community, having meaningful relationships. Doesn't mean you can't have those things without an inclusive education, but the research is very clear. At the same time, a lot of schools do not make it very feasible for families to have that experience. There's a lot of schools in almost every community in almost every part of this country and internationally that push back really hard or that don't consider the standard best practice, including kids with even very complex disabilities like most of our kids in general education classes. So that's just something to kind of frame this discussion. So we wanted to make this discussion very honest about the ups and downs, the challenges, and the realities of inclusive education. We also know that in the States and hopefully in many other countries, this is very much supported by law. The Individuals with Disability in Education Act, as we heard earlier, is very strong in its support for inclusive education. So this really puts a tremendous amount of pressure on families to be advocates and sometimes to be like pioneer warriors in their school districts if they truly want inclusion, because the schools may push back at every juncture. And they also, I think, are going to be families who do have the opportunity to have their kids included, and it just doesn't work out for whatever reason. And it's also not an all or nothing equation. Inclusion isn't 100% or zero. I've heard parents say that by having my kid have 2 or 3 hours of more self-contained or a quieter classroom environment, it allows them to be successful for the other 3 hours. Or a student may spend a year in a special education type focused school and then decide to come back to the general education school, right? So it's a malleable reality. So I hope that creates some kind of framing for everybody, and we really want this to be an open dialogue. So we're going to start with Samuel sharing a 3-minute video he put together about his own experience with inclusive education, different from what you saw last night in the film. So if Samuel, if you want to go ahead, we're going to cue this up and play it. This is your 3-minute kind of description of what school was like for you in high school and particularly.
I've been in regular school and classes since preschool. I was pretty nervous about going to high school, but it was awesome. One day a girl at school that I like asked me to eat lunch with her. I got so excited that I kicked my feet out and broke the foot plate right off of my chair. My favorite class in high school was street law. My teacher was Mr. Boseman. He was funny. The class was really interesting. We got a tour of a police station, a county jail, and had a mock trial in an actual district courtroom. A lot of the time I worked on class assignments with my friends either in person or on Google Docs. I always have my Toby device for social and academic communication. The teachers for each of my classes give us a list of key vocabulary for each unit ahead of time for my Toby communication device. That way I can use the words for homework, tests, and contributing to class discussions. When I was still in high school, I was part of the school TV station called CHS Life. I did the Red Sox and New England Patriots report each week. I was also on the yearbook staff and the school newspaper. I took photos on my iPhone and did interviews. I was a member of the Be the Change Club. We organized multicultural events at the school and welcomed new Americans who moved to Concord. Since freshman year, I helped lead our team check-in meetings with a PowerPoint. Here is an example of the PowerPoint that I would make in advance with my special education coordinator. Each of my teachers would talk about what is going well and what could be improved. I played unified soccer, basketball, and track. Unified sports teams are made up of students with, and without, disabilities competing against other schools with unified sports teams. I graduated from Concord High School with a regular high school diploma. I am in my 4th year of college at New Hampshire Technical Institute, which is the local community college. I have been taking one college class a semester. My favorite class so far was mindful communication. We learned about meditation, how to be present in the moment, and the importance of listening when communicating. I am about halfway towards an associate's degree in liberal arts. I am proud of what I've accomplished in school so far. I am thinking about transferring to a 4-year college in the future.
So that was Samuel's kind of scene setter for his own educational journey in 3 minutes, so quick, but we're really proud of the work Samuel's done. Samuel is actually co-moderating this panel with me, So he's going to be asking some questions, and I'll be asking some questions. But Zamel's also a stickler for details, so he wanted me to correct that he no longer uses a Tobii communication device. He's moved on to a grid pad in case people are interested in the specific device Samuel's using. So Samuel's going to ask the first question of Emma, and then we'll kind of go through the panel and ask some questions as we go. So Samuel, you want to hit your button and go ahead and ask?
Event Emma, as a school principal, you are committed to including students with disabilities in general education classes and activities at Roger Clapp School. Can you talk about why you are so committed to inclusion?
Thanks for that question, Samuel. I wear many different hats like all of you, so I'm going to share a few of those hats because that's the answer to this question. I am the sibling of an older brother with an intellectual disability. He's about to turn 40. And when I think about, Dan, your opening remarks about the history and research about inclusive education, that was his journey 40 years ago. And when I look at the wide range of ages in this room and particularly see younger folks thinking about what does it mean for your child or your brother or sister at this moment, thinking ahead to 40 years. So I'm a sibling first and foremost. It's really important to my brother that I say that I'm the younger sister. We grew up in Michigan. My parents fought for my brother to be fully included when they were figuring out where he would get the best services. One of the primary decisions early on was which classroom has windows in it. And we know that the legacy of segregation for individuals with disabilities often means the basement, where there isn't anything that signifies what dignity means. And one day my brother came home when he was in first grade and he said, I want to go through the same door as all my other friends. He was in a segregated classroom. And that jump-started what became, for, like I'm imagining is true for many of you, this family fight over and over and over again about how do you make sure that this individual feels a sense of belonging, dignity, ability to grow academically and socially, and realize that as much as my brother was going to change, it was mostly about how the rest of the world was going to change to see who he was. I became a teacher because I wanted to make sure that siblings were able to see their brother or sister valued in school. And so I moved to Boston, did my teaching program, and started working in a full inclusion school and realized that this was really hard. It's one thing to believe in it deeply, and it's another thing to do it every single day. My brother, Micah, is in one of Dan Habib's other films called Intelligent Lives, and there's he came in and filmed me, and I've never sweat so much in my life. And Dan happened to capture a particular moment where I was really questioning, what does it take to do inclusion well? I had a student with Down syndrome in my classroom, and when I looked at her, I looked at my brother, and I said, oh my goodness, I'm failing her every single day. And the gift of community is that community tells us how to pause and reflect. So I went home and watched videos of my brother at that age. And I was like, oh, Micah's grown over time too. How he was when he was in second grade is not how he is when he's in his 30s. He was running around and leaving the classroom and talking at a pace that was hard for other people to understand. And then I realized that I wasn't going to do it well, but I was going to be creative. I was going to partner with families. And I became a school principal because I believe that many folks in school administration don't know much about special education. And as much as principals care deeply about all kids, unless you believe that all kids actually belong in your school, you're missing an opportunity to do that well. And so for the past 3.5 years, I've been the proud principal of a full inclusion school. So I share a little bit of those pieces just as a way to say, like, Why do I do inclusion? I do it because the individuals like my brother deserve to have a great education with high expectations and high supports. I do it because I want teachers to know that they can make mistakes. They can come into my office and cry about the miserable things that have happened, and we can be honest and figure out what we're gonna do the next day. And I wanna do it because families like yourselves deserve to be heard and valued by the folks that are educating your children. And it doesn't mean we do it all right, but I wanted to have those mindsets as I think about the value of inclusion.
Thank you, Emma. Extremely well said. Thank you. And Micah made sure we got a selfie together for this event. He said, "Don't forget to get a picture with Emma that you could send me," which we did. Alice, we really wanted to have a broad perspective on this panel and a variety of perspectives, and you've had an up and down journey, you and James together and your family, with inclusion and inclusive ed, and you've had to make decisions along the way that I'm sure were hard. Do you want to share a little bit about that journey and the decisions you've had to make?
Sure. Oh, it is on. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that, so in 2019, we made a decision. The school that my kids had gone to, I have 3 children. James is my middle child. He has a brother 2 years older than him and a sister 2 years younger. And the school, at the very basic level, was not wheelchair accessible. It was an old school that it was wonderful, but we could not make it work. And so as a family, we decided to actually move to a different county where all of the schools were designed fully accessible. And so at the very basic level, that was a big change. All of my kids were affected by that. Our family was affected by it. It turned out to be the best decision we made. They were all very happy, but I think it can be scary thinking about moving schools, especially with other siblings, and I'm really grateful we did it. I think that, would you say that your brother and sister are also happy we moved schools? Yeah. So I think for us that was a big moment of that decision, but it's been easier since then.
And just to follow up to that, once you moved to that new district, did you find that a vision of inclusion that you had was possible? Were there still challenges? What happened at that point?
I mean, there's always challenges, but we found that the communication was wonderful. We were able to talk to the school. James was really able to make these decisions of what he was interested in, the classes that he wanted to participate in, like go to all the classrooms that he chose to go to. But he also decided that math and English sometimes were easier to do in the classroom where he had more support and it was a little bit quieter. So to us, and I think for what we think about when we think about inclusivity, is that the child has a lot of say in what their education looks like, and I think that's a really important part of the journey. Is sometimes, I mean, James probably would not opt to take math or English if he didn't have to. He'd probably take PE the whole time, but no, I think having them be a part of that conversation is really important.
And just before I have Sam ask a question of James, I'll add on that point that, again, I learned a lot from going around the country and learning from all these other schools and families, and there were many pioneers who came before us that taught us things. And one of them was to have your child at their IEP meetings as early as possible. And Samuel and Betsy, of course, is here today. The two of us, invited Samuel with the school into your IEP meetings starting when he was 3, even for during that transition, even for just part of the meeting, even to just show like the artwork that you've done, just to set the tone for the meeting. This is a child that we're talking about. This is this beautiful life. This is not a stack of papers and folders. And then you continued to be in your IEP meetings right through elementary school, and then in middle school started co-leading the meetings, as you saw through that PowerPoint. And I'm a really huge advocate, we are as a family, of student-led or co-led IEP meetings. It changes everything when you have the students starting to play an active role in their meetings, and especially the engagement that they have in the meetings. So Samuel has a question for James. I think James has prepared an answer for in advance, if that's accurate.
Yes, but so we're newbies at the panel, so I think I know where the microphone is.
Just put it right behind lower part.
Okay.
I think you'll
So
be
yeah,
okay.
I think we're good.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, go ahead, Samuel. You can ask the question, then James can answer. Samuel left it all on the field yesterday, but he's trying to motivate. Go ahead, bud. You got it.
James, what are some of the challenges you've experienced at school?
I had more challenges as my old school because it was really hard to get around. I do not have many challenges as my middle school except when people who did not know me treated me like I didn't understand them. By the end of 8th grade, everyone knew me and how much I was capable of. At graduation, I won an award for how friendly and outgoing I am. The award was called Heart of Henley.
Love it. Great persistence. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Alice, before we move on to Soraya?
No, I don't
Okay.
think so.
All right. Congratulations, James, on that award and for your persistence. Yes. So, Soraya, I know there are people here today. There are people on Zoom. There are people who are just getting into the school system who may not feel like their kids are being welcomed into their school, and they're being directed from a very early age to self-contained settings before the school even tries, perhaps, to include that child. So what do you say to families who are trying to include their kids in typical schools? How do you coach them as a family engagement specialist to advocate for what their vision is?
Thank you for that question. I'm really honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me. It is a humbling experience. So when I talk to families, there are things that are powerful message that too often as educators we don't share with families. When you walk in a space, wherever the space is, have in your mind that you belong. And when I'm hearing Alice saying that they couldn't have a walkthrough for the wheelchair, that hurts. And I think too often as administrators, we're not really thinking about families' needs. And I always tell people it's important to put the empathy aspect of the work, to be human for a moment. So the message for me is just say that you belong. And belonging means that you come with your full person. As a woman of color, when I came to this country, I never really felt that way. I deal with my son also who's going through a lot of challenges because I always felt some way that people will not hear me, they will not understand me, they will not be where I am. So my message, what I've learned through the years is that I belong. And because I belong, I need to ask for the things that I need. So when I say families to ask, you're gonna ask again and again until you get an answer. That's the only way, and I think about the IDA Act in 1975, how it's been amended many times, and even in 2004 again. It's because of you, families, because of your voice, because you are not afraid to talk for your children, you're not afraid to share your stories. I really believe that story matters. And through this journey here, when I came this morning listening to PPA Mary speaking, the message is clear. Unless you say something, nothing gonna happen. I also tell parents that they are not alone. Regardless of the circumstances that you're going through, you are not alone. Please remember that. So before you leave, I always tell families, connect with someone, get their phone numbers. Because whatever it is that you are not saying, someone else is going through it, and hopefully that will help. I also tell families that I prefer saying family as opposed to say parent, because I believe in the word parent, you have partner. So know that you are a partner in the school system. The school too often do not know how to accommodate to your needs of your child or yourselves. So unless you know that your voice really matters, that you can say something, they will not really listen because they're not themselves aware of how to support your child. I will go to say that you are the expert. Believe it or not, you are the expert. You are the one going through those circumstances on a daily basis. Because you are the expert, share your ideas. Tell them what you need. And before the school starts, talk to someone. As a family engagement specialist for the Brockton Public School, my pride is the fact that I have the chance to listen to families. Because I believe their story matters. Because I really believe their children matters, as we see in this is not just a stack of paper, really. It's a human being that we are dealing with. So I think we need to go back to be human again, sensitive to others, and just be present, as I believe Samuel mentioned. And when it comes to the message or strategies, I feel that, as they say in the EDI, every child has a right to an education. It's a right that you have. It's not because it's a favor. It is your right. And those laws are there for a reason, not just to sit there, but to be active. And as we are moving forward in saying what we need and saying that we belong and share our stories, this is the only way that I think we can really move the needle and actually have the respect, really, that everyone truly deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Soraya, for your passion, eloquence. So wonderful to hear. I'm going to ask a question of Emma in a minute, but I want to remind folks that these are all being recorded. Like, there's so much good information that I'm having trouble processing it all, so we can rewatch this if you want, because it's going to be recorded and distributed by the Bow Foundation. But Emma, I think question for you, and then Samuel has more questions for James and Alice. I think one of the challenges for a lot of families is they don't know what it could look like to include kids with very complex disabilities and communication challenges and mobility challenges and health challenges. And again, I feel fortunate that I got to see that happening in a lot of schools, and you're a principal doing that. What are some of the practices in your school that enables students, even with quite complex disabilities, to be included? What are the educational practices and other practices that you could highlight?
I want to refer to what Samuel, hit the presentation video that you shared, Samuel, about what your journey was like. There's a part of me that's like, I want to take that back to my staff. And the piece that is most important is endless creativity. It's exhausting to do that all the time. It doesn't mean we always get the solutions that we want. And how do I, as a school principal, create conditions so that my teachers and staff can be creative in a system that is rigid, that is not designed for nearly everyone, but particularly kids of color, particularly kids with disabilities, particularly kids who speak multiple languages. And we're all trained to live in that box. And so the gift of having folks who don't live in that box is that they challenge us to be creative. And often our graduate programs to become folks in education don't teach us to be creative. And I hear in the example that you shared about your family moving, in many ways that I see as there's a deep sadness that you all had to move. And the creativity that it takes and the courage it takes to say, we're not going to do that fight here because they're not creative enough to figure that out, but we're going to do that somewhere else. When I became a principal, I actually had Lydia Brown, who was in the Right Ahead that you interviewed, Samuel, present to my staff, because first and foremost, staff have to have a vision of who belongs in our community. And by unpacking ableism, what we begin to hear is that actually everyone's impacted by disability in some way. You know, the art teacher raises her hand and shares oh, I used to visit my older brother who lived in a group home. And then we hear about someone who has their own child with a disability. Then we hear about staff members who have their own disabilities and were in self-contained classrooms growing up, and now, because of the way special education felt impactful to them, they're here as educators. But we have to have a streamlined vision about who belongs and what it takes to do that. So I use the phrase, all kids and staff and families deserve high expectations with high support. We don't know what's possible. That's beautiful, that's scary. When my brother was born 40 years ago, my parents could never have imagined that someone with a disability similar to Down syndrome was going to live hundreds of miles away from my parents. They live in Michigan, he lives in Syracuse. That he would be living with paid support staff. That he would be walking on his own to his job, which is a teaching assistant at a university, teaching future teachers about inclusive education. They could never have imagined that. That was never explicitly written in an IEP. It was never the psychologist's report. But there was a deep belief that we don't know what's possible, and we're going to listen to our children. We are going to not allow our own fears about what's going to happen when they go out to prevent ourselves from saying, like, we're going to try this. It might not always work out, but we're still going to try it. I just got off the phone yesterday with a family, or an advocate of a family who's joining our school community, and there was a worry that in the child's IEP it said he cannot go on a field trip unless he has a one-to-one support. And that was written because challenges came up, and that was the school's way of saying, like, well, that's our way out of getting out of including this kid in a field trip, because if we don't have the staff, then we can't do it. And when I hear that, I feel both deep shame for the public education system, because ultimately that's about the adult, that's an adult problem. But that kid deserves to go on any field trip. And that's not something that needs to be put on a family. That's the kid's legal right. But how do we move it away from the burden on the family to the burden on the school system? And when families call me frustrated, which is definitely hard to hear, and sometimes, in all honesty, I put the phone a little further away because the volume becomes very loud. Sometimes families might apologize at the end, and I always say, what I hear in your voice is deep love. You can be frustrated with me. Like, we're not always gonna do it right, but we need families to continually hold us accountable, because we're not gonna do it right. And it doesn't mean that every administrator or every teacher is gonna be like, yes, thanks for that feedback. I'm so glad you told me that today. But we are only as good as the folks around us make us. And I whether that means a kid is fully included for all part of the day, whether it means they're included for a couple years and then they do something different, wherever your child is, continuing to be that parent, that family member that knows what you want for your child, and like nudging the system over and over again. Doesn't mean you have to do it every single day, doesn't mean you don't take breaks, doesn't mean you don't like delete the phone number and say, I'm never gonna call this institution again. But finding ways to keep pushing us, because the only folks who hold us accountable, especially for kids that are on the margins, are families.
I love all that, Emma, and don't you wish Emma was your school principal? I do, but I think that accountability is so critical, and I think one way that families can and should hold schools accountable, and again, schools are partners, they're not the opposition, they should be partnerships, is by getting everything you know is gonna help your child succeed into the IEP. It needs to be documented in paper, in writing, because that's a legally binding document. So Samuel's IEP grew to what, like 40 pages by the end of your senior year? Because it was everything from like, we know that Samuel flourishes when he gets to work with peers. We know Samuel needs audio information for all of his learning. And as you said in the film, that's how you learn. We know that universal design for learning is the only way that you're gonna be successful. So that's just a quick thought. So we're gonna do one final round of questions here, and then we're gonna open it up for questions both virtually and in person. Samuel, you have a question for Alice.
Alice, now that James is in a school that is working well for him and your family, can you talk about how your family works with his school to help James feel happy and successful?
Yes, absolutely. And as we're sitting here, it occurs to me that we're actually going into a new school in the fall. So I'm hoping it goes well. I think I've learned a lot. We've learned a lot over the years, and I think that we are hoping that with working with the school that they are going to listen to us. I am very good at speaking up. I think it comes down to having a really good relationship with the teacher that is sort of the primary teacher, but also getting to know the other teachers in the classrooms that they are going to. I love the page of sort of all of Samuel's classes, and that they all entered in notes, and as we're sitting here talking, I'm like, we need to have an IEP sort of hub of information, because I think there's so much that we can all learn from one another on what do we ask for, what are the parameters. What James took a class this year, and his big project was actually teaching the entire school about GNAO1 through GNO on the Awareness Day, and everyone wore blue and purple. And I mean, it's a school of middle schoolers. If you have a middle schooler, to get them all engaged in anything, but they were all really in and asking amazing questions. And I think just finding opportunities to teach in a way that's meaningful and the kids also feel engaged. But I think that we also struggle with finding out, on a day-to-day basis, what is happening at school? How are they reporting that back to us? That's an ongoing thing that we struggle with, but we do have a sheet of paper, and every day whoever's working with James fills that out and tells us what they're working on in reading, what they're working on in math. We didn't have really any homework this year, but just to keep us up to date so that I can have conversations with James about it. I know what to ask for. I think just being able to have those conversations and just knowing more, because you want them to be independent. You want them to have this place where they go and it's their own space. But then I, as a parent, need to know what to ask about to learn about the day. Now, I do have 2 other kids, and I probably get more information from James from this sheet. My 16-year-old is always, it's good. And that's it. So it's a helpful resource for sure. But, first day of school, I always am like, look, text message me, call me. I hope that is both ways, because it's important.
All right, Samuel, you got a question for James? James, you're ready to answer once the question comes?
James, I hear you are starting high school this year. What are some classes you are most looking forward to?
I am the most excited about the 2 electives I am taking, sports management and drama. The sports management class is taught by the football coach, and I think we will spend a lot of time talking about sports. I am also going to be an assistant play caller for the varsity football team this fall. I am the most excited about the 2 electives I am taking, sports management.
We hit it twice.
That's
yes.
right. Yeah,
Well.
nice. I love it, James. So I think one thing that you and Sam will have in common is by having some parts of school that you're so excited about and is so motivating, might help you get through some of the classes that you're not quite as excited about, like chemistry. That was tough. Alan, So, but I think that's a motivation to come to school, to have the social relationships, the friendships, and I hope schools put as much emphasis on those opportunities as they do on the academic rigor, because without that, the kids are not going to be as motivated. Soraya, a final question official question for the panel at this point, and then we're going to take some audience questions. You work with a lot of families of color in your region, and new Americans who don't speak English as a first language, who may face multiple barriers to their access to education and inclusive education. How do you collaborate with those families who may experience marginalization and discrimination in multiple ways?
Wow, where do I start? Actually, I wrote the sentence that I would like to share with you, because this is the knowledge that I learned from many families as I talk to them, as I listen to their stories, and believing that collaboration, partnership is truly essential or crucial for the development of every families or any communities. Culturally responsive family engagement means we are intentional about connecting with the population that we serve by sharing knowledge and resources to enhance children's learning and development collectively. Collectively, because the resources, it's back and forth, it's input and output. And I am in Brockton, as you know, there's at least 17,000 students. multiplied by families. And I say families because it's not mom and dad, because they come from so many places: Central America, Haiti, Cape Verde. They speak many languages: Hmong, Spanish, Portuguese. There are many languages. As much as I would like to say that I speak all those languages, I don't. Therefore, I need to collaborate with other communities, community organizers that are culturally, linguistically responsive. They can hear their story without making something out of it that is not. So I believe that as we are doing that, we tackle that idea of the Maslow hierarchy of needs, right? There are certain things, unless we talk about that, we do them, we cannot really expect family really to do certain things that we ask of them. There's a story that I failed to share earlier about my son. When I said that you need to ask until you get an answer, I receive phone call on a daily basis. And every time that I receive that phone call, I see the school, believe me, my anxiety level goes high, and I'm like, what is it again? And I've learned that sometimes they assume a few things about our children. And I'm just fortunate that I can hear Samuel, James' story. They have dreams. They also have hope also for themselves. And unfortunately, sometimes the school downplay their wants and their needs. My son doesn't function well if he's not drinking water. And that was the first email that I sent to the school. Allow him to get water. And sometimes they allow rules really to take over the humanity, the things that our children needs. And I just asked that question: did you allow him to get some water? What did they say to me? The rule is at a certain time they can't. It doesn't work like that. So do not call me unless you do your part. And that's what I'm saying. We just need to talk. And believe me, they made that little change. It seems little, but it makes a big difference. The phone calls were very small. Families who are coming to the district right now, when it comes to size of their problems, it's really maximized because there are so many things that they do not have. Think about the trauma that they go through, even coming to this country. They are traumatized on a daily basis. As I listened to Mary speaking earlier in terms of mental health, the need that they have because of the challenge or the trauma they went to back home, now coming to the district that they have to learn to adapt to so many other things that they not choose to. Also to adjust, really. I recall when I came here, I didn't know where to take the bus and where to go. It is a challenge overall. So I believe that as we support families culturally and respect them, as I mentioned earlier, and give them the resources that they need. One thing that I do when I have workshops tailored to needs that they have. How to navigate the school system, how they understand. Maybe they don't know the terminology in terms of, the IEP, LRE means this, least restrictive environment. This is not what matters. It's what really they need for their children. I also believe, I also mentioned collaboration. The Federation for Children with Special Needs, it's an amazing organization, and they are also the reason that I'm here. They really push families to know what they do not know so that they can enter a space. When they do come, they know what to say. I encourage family to always go with someone who speaks the language, because sometimes the language that they are speaking is not because of you don't speak English. It's because just the terminology are so hard for you. You just don't understand what's going on. You went to the meeting, yes, but were you there? You were there, but you didn't get it. Everything is here. So I think it's important that we are go to basic. Just be human, as I mentioned earlier. Empathy really goes a long way. The language support, they didn't need it. Maya Angelou said, surviving is important, but thriving is elegant. I think it's time for us and the school, the community to come really together so we can elevate family's voice in a way that we see our children flourish. We see that the dreams come from dreams to reality. So my job, I have a lot of pride in my job because it is the most humbling experience for families to come and speak their heart to you and share their dreams for their families. And again, I am truly honored to be here to listen to not only the stories, to hear the movies, and also to appreciate you and say thank you for not being afraid to just be present and claiming that space that too often people will not ever give to you, but to know that you deserve it.
Thank you, Soraya, so much. Thank you for your passion and your work. We so appreciate it. So we have maybe 15 more minutes, I think. We started a little late, so if we go 5 minutes late, to answer any questions. So are there any online that you want to start with? Or
Yeah,
do we
let me
wanna-
start
And
there.
then we'll make sure to get you a mic for your questions in person.
First question feels like we've talked a lot about public schools. Thoughts on children in alternative schools, private schools, who might be willing to accept children with disabilities? If anyone has experience or thoughts on that, the question would be interested in feedback there.
I'll make a quick point, and then we can. Anyone else? You know, private schools are not beholden, in the United States at least, to the same laws as public schools around IDEA. So you will not get the rights that you have in a public school in a private school. So that's just extremely important to know. And you may not. They have no obligation to deliver occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy. You know, some if it's an out-of-district placement, that's different. If it's something that the district supports and enables. But that's one point. Does anybody else want to add to that?
I mean, for us, it's the same thing. I know that if the school doesn't have the ability to support the child, they will. Sometimes we have, you know, a Virginia Institute of Autism, and so if the school doesn't have the ability to support the child there, they will actually pay for them to go to that school. But I think, at least for James and his needs, we have always been, like, we feel like public school is absolutely the right place for him as far as support goes.
I have heard and seen powerful examples of inclusion in faith-based schools, and like public schools, it's about who's willing to be in the space and to be creative, and sometimes, depending on the level of need in a school community, going to spaces where the level of need is not as high allows for folks to be creative, because the intensity of other needs aren't taking up other time too, if that makes sense. And so I just want to make like a little plug for that, and there's examples of that, particularly in the Catholic schools and Jewish day schools.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've seen that in South Carolina, for example. The Catholic schools are among the most inclusive anywhere.
There's another question online from a GNAO1 patient in preschool. He says, I'm sad my friends are going to different schools. They're going to kindergarten after preschool. Do you have any advice or thoughts?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have some audience contributions from Penny saying, keep in touch, find ways to spend time together outside of school. That's a great point.
Yeah, I agree. Just, I think getting together, and I mean, unfortunately, I think that's a pretty typical for all kids. We do transition to different schools, and I think that is, yeah, it's difficult, and you plan play dates. Do you agree with that, James?
You agree, Sam?
Yeah.
Emil's smiling in agreement. Looks like James is too. Penny, I think, had an in-person point, so let's get you the mic.
Just one thing, I know we're advised in Australia, when you have an IEP meeting, take a silent note taker with you. It's enough to be there with your child and just listening to what they're saying and trying to contribute, and then go have a coffee afterwards with your friend who's taken all the notes. So silent note taker is a good point. And Emma, just with the creativity. Just with the creativity, I think that's an excellent point. And James, when my son started high school, the PE master, physical ed, said, I don't know how he's going to do sport. By the end of year 12, he did rugby, everything. So the creativity is the answer. And the swimming carnival in the raft, ran the race every single year, couldn't swim, but he was in the raft, and the PE master was pushing that. So there was no excuse. Al was brave enough to be in the raft, though.
Thank you, Penny. Who else in the room, or this right in the middle there? We'll get you the mic.
Hi, I know we've talked about this before, but when you say inclusion, are you referring to a typical classroom setting for Samuel, or an ICOT classroom with an integrated kind of 50-50, could be with typical functioning, and then other kids that 50% have IEPs? And then I have a follow-up question with that.
I'll answer, and others may have perspectives. Every state has different ways of defining these things. Like in New York, they talk about 12-1-1 classrooms. When we talk, the federal definition of inclusive education is that a student spends at least 80% of their day in regular general education settings alongside typical kids. Now, you might have 5 or 6 kids in that classroom with IEPs and 18 without. You know, it's going to vary. But Samuel's experience, for the most part, was in general education. There were times in high school, right, when you had really struggled in math that we, as a team, including Samuel, decided, I don't want to be in a regular math class. I want some individualized instruction. But that was Samuel's choice. And I think that's also an important thing, especially as kids get older. So that was our experience. But again, we started in a school district that was very positive about inclusion and had some very good structures in place. So they had like 70% of the way there, and Betsy and Samuel and I advocated to get them to the 90 or 95% that we wanted. And that was an advantage. And I know a lot of families don't start with that general foundation of inclusive education beliefs, and that makes it so much harder, and it makes people move and do things like that. Does anybody else want to add to that question or not?
So for us, what it looks like for James, and again, we call it something different in Virginia. James is in what's called a C-based classroom. So that's sort of his homeroom where he goes. There's like 5 or 6 kids in there, and they all have IEPs, but then he goes out throughout the day. You know, middle school and high school, you're never in the same classroom, so it's different once you get to that for all kids. James, like Samuel, took a math class, and he ended up only just staying. He would stay for the first half of class, and then he would take the work back to his C-based classroom, and then that is where they would do the homework and any work that was needed, because sometimes, as much as James loves socialization, it was sometimes distracting to getting his math work done. So I think, again, to just allow them to have their voice heard and to figure out what works best for them. And that changes all the time, and it's going to be a daily change, and some days are better than others. I think, those of us who are parents in the room, we know that. So
Awesome. Another question in person or
Thank
online.
you.
There's somebody back there with the mic. Thank you.
Hi. You talk about kind of making sure that your district is good. How do you do that? And are there resources to kind of help you figure out if that's the case? Or like, what kind of elements should you be looking for when you're having conversations with people to know they're going in the right direction?
Do you want to we'll start with Alice, and maybe Emma, either one of you might have thoughts about, or Soraya about that. Go ahead.
I mean, we talk to parents, honestly. I think that just hearing firsthand the experiences of families is really, really important. For us, that's just been the main feeder. I mean, honestly, also to just go look at the schools, and you can tell pretty quickly where the classrooms are. James's main classroom, it is in this main hallway. They are a huge part of the socialization of, middle school and high school. The hallway is where everything happens, and the fact that it's all on one level. So I think going to look at the schools during the day when the kids are there is really important, and then just talking to families.
So Emma, let me follow up. You work in a very inclusive school, but you know the landscape in Boston. Both of you do. What do you think is an indicator of a very inclusive school?
My first reaction was like, you don't know until your kid's there. And that's really scary, right? Because when your child is at home, there is a love and care and compassion that you want when they leave that space. And what I have learned is that a huge barrier to great inclusion is teacher mindset, but also the support that teachers get, and the backing that they get from their administration to think creatively, to be pushed. I can think of my own staff who, when I first came in, students with disabilities were getting different text than the grade level text. And what was missing was the teacher's support for understanding, how do you make this text accessible? Because this teacher's default was like, I want them learning to read, and so I'm gonna do this thing because that's what I know. And so I guess 2 things. One, like teacher satisfaction, because I think like how much do teachers feel like they have a sense of belonging and can take risks and be creative, and just feeling like that you can be in conversation with whoever that administration is too.
I think, Alice, you really visiting the school, that was one of the first things that I thought of. but also you already have some experience with the other school. So you already seen certain things and the thing that you don't want to see. So when you go to that school as you visit, you bring whatever it is it's working for your child also. The school culture and climate truly matters. As I enter a space, do you receive me with a smile? Do you receive me, we don't really care, you're still on the phone? Those are little things that we don't pay attention to. They matters. So I think that that is important because the principal really is responsible for the school climate. And the culture, I think it's based on the teacher. What is the culture in the classroom? Or does everyone feel welcome? Because inclusion, what it does, it really compels us to act. It compels us to do something. So again, it's about your child's need. What is your child really need? What is one thing, if there is it for that child, you don't want your child to be in that school? So I think that is also important. Again, bringing the works that you already have done to that school, that will give, and trust your instinct. Families, you got this. Trust your instinct. If it doesn't feel right, it is not right. It's unfortunate because I've been working in the school for a long time. I've seen many things. And again, connect with other families. That says a lot. Thank you.
And we wrap it up. Yeah, we need to wrap it up now. But one more question. Oh,
That family, Sarai, that might be their first school placement. Is this the first time your kids? Yeah. So that might be a little bit of a different perspective. And then the thing I was going to ask was, we've talked a little bit. I know I've talked to some of you guys, but for the other families in the room who don't live in great school districts or live in situations like ours, we made the decision to put our child in a completely uninclusive situation, but it's the right situation for her within our current district structure. We obviously support these ideas, but what do you say to those families who are making hard decisions about placement and what's about really in the best interest of your child and what's available to your family? What does that look like? Your advice and perspective, I would appreciate that.
Did you? I can answer, but not from a parent perspective. But
Emily's already heard. I think she wants to hear what you guys have to.
When I'll tell like a very quick story. So when my brother was aging out of public schools and he was in the transition age, it was just at the beginning of a lot of post-secondary inclusive education opportunities. Very brand new. Now there are like hundreds of programs all across the United States. If you go to thinkcollege.net, incredible transformation of what the post-secondary experience looks like. My mom, like many of you, were fighting for what was right for my brother Mike at that time and what he wanted. He wanted to go to college because that's what all the seniors that he was with were doing. He wanted to go to the University of Michigan because that's where his grandfather went and my dad and uncle. And so my mom was working creatively with her social work degree to figure out what that could look like. In the process that happened, my brother went to a more self-contained post-secondary program. And he would get on the bus every day, which was not his common experience, going to our neighborhood public school. And he would get off the bus every day, and he loved it. And one day he came home, and remembering my mom had been working very hard to try to figure out like what this post-secondary inclusive education could look like. And he came home and he's like, I don't want to go to college anymore. And my mom, in her wonderful grace, bit her tongue and said, okay. Like, tell me more. What are you enjoying about that experience? I share that just as like a response to your story that the journey is long. This is just one moment. If my parents let that one moment define the rest of my brother's life, he might not be in Syracuse right now, but they let him live in that moment because that's what he wanted at that time. And so I say, like, be gentle to yourselves and know that this journey is long, that's exhausting, but how do we continue to push when it makes sense, learn from the places wherever those places are when we're there, and keep possibilities open.
That was, I think, a great, perfect way to end this panel. We could talk a lot more, but we really want to make sure people get to these amazing breakouts that we have next. So thank you, panelists. You were all amazing. So appreciate your time and your wisdom that you brought today. And one thing I'll just mention is during the break, I'll go and work with the AV folks, but we have a website for my last film called Intelligent Lives, and we have a resource library that's very deep and well-researched and has a big section on inclusive education and other areas. So I'll put that up on the screen. It's all free stuff that you can look at and download, so there's a lot of resources there. And you can feel free to reach out to us for more information, too.
Yeah, I just was going to say, I think that using people who have already, if there are IEPs, if you want to look at sample IEPs as our kids get older, ours is not perfect and it has changed over the years, but it's building in, it's just knowing what can actually go into IEPs, and you learn a ton as you go. James's is ridiculous at this point. It's really long. He sits in all the meetings, but I think, reach out. I'm happy to share that. I'm happy to share the page that comes back from school. I think we want to be resources and support one another in this process, so please lean on us.
Great, agreed. All right, I think Stephen's going to take it away for the next part.
Thanks so much, everybody. I don't know, I feel like I want to take Emma and Soraya back to Northern Virginia with me and bring them into some of the conversations we've got to have. So what we're going to do for the afternoon is we're going to shift into breakout sessions. So on your agenda, you'll see breakout sessions, and they're numbered. And we've got time for you to participate in 2 breakout sessions. If you look around this room, breakout session 1, 2, and 3 are designated on the walls. Breakout session 4 and 5 are just going to be across the hall. I will note that the breakout session number 3 with Alice and James is only going to be offered during the first rotation today. As you make your way to the breakout sessions, I think there might be ice cream out in the main hallway. And then we will not come back here afterwards. It's just a lot of fuss to get everybody back into the room. So this will be our last time, I think, together to just say a quick thank you. And the best way I can think of to say thank you is to recognize a GNAO1 warrior who's got his birthday today. So Levi in the back is 10. And it feels only appropriate to sing him happy birthday. So would you join me? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Levi. Happy birthday to you. That was great. Thanks. Okay, well, we'll split for the breakout sessions. Emily and I are around if you have any questions. Thanks.